rockets in every shuttle just before launch. The next video will tell you a little bit more about the VAB.
That guy. See that guy with the number to be able to use it. Right? Right here. With a little screen. That number.
As you enter, please move all the way to the front of the theater to make room for the guests behind you. Our presentation will begin shortly. On behalf of NASA and Kennedy Space Center, welcome to the Apollo Saturn V Center. Our presentation will begin in a few short moments. And now, it is with great pride that we present the story of NASA's Apollo program, the greatest adventure mankind has ever undertaken.
When I was a kid, I used to dream about flying through space. Every week on TV, I'd watch my heroes as they jumped into their rocket ships and took to the stars. And I wanted to be like them. They had courage, imagination, and no problem ever stood in their way for long. You know, in the end, when we actually did send men into space, it turned out that those were exactly the qualities it took.
I'm John Hudson. This is Pad 39 of the Kennedy Space Center. I was a launch controller here when from this very spot, man took off to fly to the moon. It was a journey that began 12 years before that rocket ever left the ground. And it started on the other side of the world.
Back then, we were one of two superpowers that always seemed to be on the edge of a terrible war. In 1957, the Soviet Union launched the first ever man-made satellite into Earth orbit. They called it Sputnik, which means traveling companion. And in a world where peace hung on a delicate balance, it seemed to create a dangerous advantage. Every ham radio operator in America could hear a beat. People were afraid. Were the Soviets looking down on us? Watching us? If they could make a satellite pass over our cities, could they do the same with a bomb? Our own space program kicked into high gear, and less than 2 months later, we were ready to launch our own satellite. In 1961, we fell even further behind. Soviet cosmonaut Yuri Gagarin became the first man into space, circling the world in just 89 minutes. We had our own astronauts, and they were eager and ready to take the big run. But our manned space program couldn't seem to get off the ground. We stuck with it, and on May 5th, 1961, things finally started going right. Astronaut Alan Shepard took his ship Freedom 7 6.5 miles into space. America had its first space hero. Just a few days later, our space program received a new challenge. But this one did not come from the Soviet Union. It came from our young president. In one inspiring moment, he changed the mission from one based in fear of the present to one of hope for the future.
But why, some say, the moon? Why choose this as our goal? And they may well ask, why climb the highest mountain? Why, 35 years ago, fly the Atlantic? Why does Rice play Texas? We choose to go to the moon. We choose to go to the moon. We choose to go to the moon in this decade and do the other things. Not because they are easy, but because they are hard.
than 16 minutes into space, and now we were going to the moon. We would have to design a rocket the size of a 36-story office building, put it together with the precision of a microscope, and accelerate it to the speed of a bullet. Then we would have to guide it to a moving target 250,000 miles away. Many people thought it was an impossible dream, but 400,000 of us set about making that dream a reality. It would be the longest, most hazardous voyage that any man had dared to attempt. But step by step, mission by mission, we orbited the Earth, perfecting the skills and technologies we would need on this incredible journey. Our astronauts practiced maneuvering, docking, and the 1,000 other tasks that would comprise the moon mission. We created new alloys, lighter and stronger than anything seen before. We designed communication systems that would be reliable over the vast distances. And behind it all, we tried to perfect the rocket that would be powerful enough to punch out of Earth orbit and take us to the moon. One day, however, the dream of flying to the moon almost slipped away. It was January 27th, 1967. Astronauts Virgil Gus Grissom, Edward White, and Roger Chaffee were on board Apollo 1 for a plugs-out test, a full-scale dress rehearsal for the actual launch. Suddenly it happened. There was a fire in the capsule. 3 men whose lives had been in our hands were lost.
Surely the opening vistas of space promise high costs and hardships, as well as high reward. But this country of the United States was not built by those who waited and rested and wished to look behind them.
After Apollo 1, some thought we'd failed, and that the moon was out of our reach.
But we owed it to those men to learn from their sacrifice
To the moon. It was mankind's destiny to leave the shores of our planet behind and strike out across the vast ocean of space. In the great span of our history, now was the time that we could. Now was the time that we would. We stood on the eve of the longest, most dangerous journey that any man had ever undertaken. And it would be taken by Frank Borman, James Lovell, and William Anders, the crew of Apollo 8. Through those doors you'll find the firing room, launch control, just as it was on December 21st, 1968.
Please gather all the...
This is the firing room, launch control for the Apollo missions. This is not a mock-up. These are the very consoles we sat at when men first took off to fly to the moon. The tragedy of Apollo 1 had put us a year and a half behind. We were making up for it in one big leap, and we were doing it with a rocket that no man had ever flown before.
It was a few days before Christmas 1968 when Apollo 8 sat on the pad. She was the first of a new kind, a moon rocket. This was the Phoenix, risen from the ashes of Apollo 1. The first Apollo crew did not die in vain. This was to be their testament. "36 stories high, she had been fully fueled throughout the night. The liquid oxygen in her tanks caused ice to form on the outside of the craft. The extreme temperature differences between the air and the sub-zero fuel caused the metal skin of the rocket to expand and contract. Everyone was on the pad agreed. It was as though the rocket was alive, breathing, straining at the leash. Earlier in the morning, astronauts Frank Borman, Jim Lovell and Bill Anders have made their final preparations before taking that long ride out to the waiting spacecraft. The minimum safe distance from a Saturn V at liftoff was 3 miles. The reason was simple. When fully fueled, the rocket contained the explosive power of an atomic bomb. As the clock counted down, the astronauts and all of us in launch control went through the pre-flight checks, our hands on the controls of the most powerful, most complex machine ever built. It had over 2 million separate systems, and to bring these men back alive, everything had to work perfectly. Each individual system had been tested, but what we didn't know was how they would perform when all 2 million began to work together. That moment would come when the countdown clock reached 0. If a maneuvering thruster failed, if communications broke down, if navigation was off by 1 degree, if any piece of the miles of wiring, circuits, relays, or valves was defective, Frank Borman, Jim Lovell, and Bill Anders would pay with their lives. As they sat, waiting for launch on that chill December morning, these 3 astronauts were back to what they had always been, test pilots. You are now in the final minutes before the launch of Apollo 8.
Our status board indicates that all aspects are ready. Instrument unit is ready, spacecraft ready. Final check of the emergency detection system. That ready levels. First stage preparations are completed.
All systems are ready. Okay.
We're on. Ready to go to Conway.
Stand by motor. Okay, you're on.
All systems go.
Minus 45 seconds and counting. First stage, the oxygen tank has been pressurized and the pressure is still building up. Coming up in 90 seconds, mark T-minus 90 seconds and counting. The Apollo 8 crew standing by, spacecraft commander Frank Borman, Jim Lovell, Bill Anders. We now report that the liquid hydrogen tank on the third stage is pressurized. 1 minute 15 seconds. 60 seconds and counting. The vehicle now is completely pressurized. Coming up on power transfer shortly. We have the power transfer. We're now on the flight batteries within the launch vehicle. Frank Borman at this time. Finally, look at the switch list to orbit the spacecraft. 20 seconds on our test. We are still in roll at this time. 15, 14, 13, 12, 11, 10, 9, 8,
successfully orbited the moon, and the astronauts returned safely to the Earth. I know. I'm Jim Lovell, and I was one of the crew of this spacecraft, Apollo 8. We were the first men to see the surface of the moon from just a few miles away. But it was the hundreds of thousands of men and women who worked in that team, and the millions of people who supported the mission that really made it possible. That way, I guess, we all went to the moon. Now, on the other side of those doors, you'll find an actual Saturn V moon model. It's still the most powerful, the most complex machine ever built. And I guess it's the only one that can take you to another planet. I actually got to fly one on a second flight to the moon called Apollo 13. But that's another story.
And chosen for every astronaut on each of these Apollo flights, orange-flavored Tang, the energy breakfast drink.
See Brooke Lancaster on the Dick Cavett Show, Monday night on ABC.
This is CBS News color coverage of Man on the Moon. The epic journey of Apollo 11. Today, a landing on the moon. Sponsored by Western Electric. Now reporting from the CBS News Space Center in New York with the latest developments from the Apollo 11 moon mission. Correspondent Walter Cronkite.
And it's now 3 hours and 1 minute till the scheduled landing of man on the moon. On the last pass around on the near side of the moon, the Apollo 11 checkout of the lunar module systems in preparation for that landing went extremely well, we were told. Both spacecraft look good. The go has been given for undocking just...
As everywhere else, the French press is dominated by Apollo 11. The Champs-Élysées is being transformed into a public televiewing center that will carry the American space show as broadcast from Houston, Apollo 11, and the moon.
Correspondent Daniel Shore is our man in Amsterdam, not as tourist, but as observer of the Dutch and of the Americans there.
The audience is estimated at 80% of the 12 million population of this country, by far the greatest audience that any Dutch television program has ever had.
With the worldwide viewing audience estimated at 400 million, it seems fitting that man's first steps on another world are being watched by our world, united in a way never before possible.
As soon as the Eagle reappears, things begin to go wrong. Radio communications break down. Messages to Eagle must be relayed through Mike Collins aboard the command module Columbia. Throughout the crucial final checks, contact with the Eagle keeps keeps dropping out. And Flight Director Gene Kranz inches closer to aborting the mission.
Radar flight looks good.
With the vital computer links temporarily holding, the moment of decision is now.
Okay, all flight controllers, go for landing. Retro. No, I don't know. I know. Go. Telcom, go. ESP, go. Ecom, go. Surgeon, go. Capcom, go for landing.
Eagle, Houston, you're go for landing. Over. Understand, go for landing.
3,800 miles per hour, Neil Armstrong notices his checkpoints are all appearing too soon. This means a serious navigation error. At these speeds, 3 seconds long means missing the safe landing zone by 3 miles. Suddenly, the computer starts firing the maneuvering thrusters, jolting the ship back and forth. This has happened in simulations, but never this much, never this violent. The smooth descent is becoming a bumpy ride. Before that is fixed, a problem with the onboard computer. The astronauts have rehearsed for thousands of possible malfunctions, but not this one. It had been considered too unlikely. Seconds seem like hours as everyone struggles to remember the meaning of a 1202 program alarm. The deadline to safely aboard is vanishing fast. 1202 means the Eagle's onboard computer is overloading. This means Houston is blind, unable to make navigation corrections or interpret the data coming from Eagle's computer. Armstrong and Aldrin are on their own. Mission Control decides they can go ahead, if the data link doesn't fail again. 1,000 feet, and Neil Armstrong can see that the computer is proposing to put them down in a dangerous place. That landing site is full of boulders. If they land there, they will never take off again. At 350 feet, Armstrong ignores his computer navigation and veers away from the rocky landing site with no time to explain to Mission Control.
Okay, all flight controllers, next time.
In Mission Control, everybody is stunned. At 300 feet, the Eagle has left its flight plan and taken off at full speed across the face of the moon.
Eagle, Houston, it's V-Tech 2, fuel, monitor, over.
90 seconds of fuel remaining. Now less than 200 feet, and the Eagle is too low to safely abort back into orbit. They call this part of the flight plan Dead Man's Curve. All that's left for Mission Control is to read off the fuel remaining in seconds.
60 seconds.
The entire moon landing has come down to 2 men and 1 minute.
Forward. 40 feet down, 2.5. 30 seconds. 30 seconds.
Lights on. Down 2.5. Forward. 60, 2.5 down. 6 down. 4 forward. 4 forward, just to the right. 9.5. Contact right. Okay, engine stop. Tranquility base here. The Eagle has landed. Roger, Tranquility. We copy you on the ground. You got a bunch of guys about to turn blue. We're breathing again. Thanks a lot.
A short time later, history is made again.
Good, Neil. We can see you coming down the ladder now.
For one incredible moment, we are one people with one history, watching our destiny unfold.
It's 1 small step for man, 1 giant leap for mankind.
shared by an entire world.
Dear man from the planet Earth, first set foot upon the earth. It came indeed for all mankind.
With these first steps, mankind stood on the highest ground, and we saw our planet as our home port in the endless ocean of space.
There was something which was surprising to me. That occurred as I was standing on the surface. Just after we had landed, I'd gone down, standing on the surface and looking at planet Earth for the first time, seeing the beauty, seeing the finiteness of it, the limits of it, and realizing what a shame it was that people were confronting each other on that planet without realizing what it was doing to the planet. It was a very emotional moment for me. I actually shed a couple of tears. Something totally unexpected for an engineer, fighter pilot to be crying quietly up there on the moon.
Mankind had achieved a tenuous foothold in the heavens, and a new and exciting world lay waiting to be explored. Stayed for only one day, but over the next 3.5 years, 5 more Apollo missions visited the moon, and with each one, we stayed longer, roamed further, and discovered more.
I never thought when I was a kid building rockets, in high school, that we would go to the moon, before the end of the century. I mean, I thought that was something that was way in the future, fantasy.
I was rolling on the moon one day. In a very hot December day. Look at the size. That is the best example we got. Just don't stub your toe.
We've got to understand that as a people, we need to stretch. We need to reach beyond our grasp. We need to strive to do things that seem impossible, because in the accomplishment of them, we move society forward.
One of the astronauts has said those hills that we climbed give our children and grandchildren a different perspective, that they see the mountains that we couldn't see. And so what we consider impossible, they're dreaming about.
3, 2, 1.
When I have a chance to talk to kids, I tell them, the first thing I tell them is to take the word impossible out of their vocabulary. Go to their teacher tomorrow morning and scratch it out in the dictionary. The word doesn't exist. I can stand here and tell you that I lived on the moon, that I called home my home for 3 days. You tell me what is impossible in this day and age, much less in a generation that follows, much less into the 21st century. Nothing is impossible.
I like exploring things, inventing. I would like to go up there and find out what's really up there.
I would like to be an astronaut. I like to design rockets.
Payload specialist.
I ground controls. The thing that my mom can't understand is I'm terrified of heights, but I want to be an astronaut.
There's so many things I'd love to do. I would explore, I'd look for everything.
I would try to start a farm.
Millions of other galaxies that you might be able to live in.
It's the unknown. Anything's possible.
You may be able to cure certain diseases.
On Mars and dance on it. Play basketball, but you can still be short, because then you could fly up in the air. Baseball would be awesome. Hit the ball, you get a home run every time.
There are a lot of things that can benefit mankind that we, because of science, we simply cannot do on Earth.
It's such a big universe, and it's kind of strange to think that just this one tiny planet.
shuttle simulation team is making final preparations for your launch. Please stand by. The doors will open momentarily. Thank you.
Trainees report to simulator.